my business partner learned a lot about PPC advertising. So we actually launched pay-per-click on Google within the first few weeks. This is when Groupon was hot as well. And so we ran a few daily deals so people could get like the first 200 pounds of junk removal for half off, knowing that long-term there's like the customer retention and the upsell potential. We started doing some like outbound calls to commercial clients as well. We started working with the Salvation Army really early on, donating reusable goods, keeping material out of the landfill. And that's sort of, it was all sort of happening all at the same time. And we just, the first 5 years, I think we doubled our revenue 5 years in a row, just sort of like applying, just as, learning as much about sales and marketing as possible, and then trying to like apply it the next day.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have Barry Hartman, another Barry, online and tuning in, connecting with us. Super pumped to have him. Before we jump into his story and some lessons we can learn from him, because he's a multi-millionaire entrepreneur around the junk removal space. You guys are going to love his story. We're going to dive into some really cool principles around all of that. But he's really an entrepreneur, and we're going to really dive into it. But before that, I want to guys give you a free training and free gift down below in the show notes. Check this out. But many people want to build a brand online. They realize the reach that they want to make, the impact they want to make is on the other side of getting more leads and more revenue. And most of the time people struggle with those things. And so I put a free training down below that helps you accomplish that. So check that out. My gift to you, I think it'd be real helpful for you. Barry, as we're diving in here to the podcast, a question that I ask everybody is, what is high performance? How does that look? How does that feel? What is that really good definition that you have of how you apply that to your life?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's unique to everyone. So, the way I look at high performance is you get really clear on the vision for yourself or where you want your company to be. We usually look about 3 years out and are really like writing that in present day form. And so for me, if I can become that person that's building that vision 3 years out, if I can become that person today, then that keeps me ahead of the curve. And ultimately, if we define our vision as our sort of highest versions of ourselves, then to me, that's what high performance is. And when I was thinking about this, like, you might have someone playing college football that's a high performer in college football, but if they don't have that vision on how to actually get into the NFL, then high performance can sort of teeter off over time. And so that's where I think renewing this every 3 years to stay ahead of the curve, that's sort of what high performance means to me.
I love that you plan it and you got to book it out and do that. Because I think most time people miss that. They hope and dream and pray, and the goals that they have are elusive because they're just dreams. But you define them and you put them in the present tense and you build it out in 3 years. Most of the time, I think people think it's so challenging. I want to get your take on this because it's like, and then we could dive into your story after this. But most of the time people think it's like, hey, it's like my future is my future. And it's so unknown. And 20, 30 years down the road, like, oh my gosh, I don't know. It's so overwhelming to think that far down the road. And I love that you chunked it down with 3 year increments, because I think that's a little more tangible for people to actually think in the future of like, hey, in 3 years, where do I want to be? That's, because the years go by so quick. Like it's the beginning of the year, practically, when we're recording this in 2025. And it just, that last year for me just went by super quick. And it's like wild, but like you plan that out. And I love that. Like, was that always something that you built out, or did you have to really kind of work at it?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were sort of fortunate in our industry. There's an entrepreneur named Brian Scudamore who lives in my hometown of Vancouver. And he's built 1-800-GOT-JUNK into a $500 million a year empire. And he actually came up with this model called the painted picture, but he built it with Cameron Herold, who wrote a book on it. Ultimately, he was his chief operating officer, and it's a book called Vivid Vision. And so I was just drawn to it because anytime you see big success stories in your own industry, you sort of, just replicate it. And ultimately, if what works for someone else is probably going to work for us. And so we just adopted that into our business planning.
Yeah,
man, that must have been about 12 years ago when we first started. And so we've done about 4 reiterations of it. And I always say, like, we always oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we overestimate what we can accomplish in 12 months, but you really underestimate what you can do in 3 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I like getting the clarity around 3 years out, um, just to see it and feel it and share it with your team, and you can sort of start to bring it to life.
That's so awesome that you had that mentor to kind of point you in that direction. I think it's so, so important. Most of the time people wing it and they don't really get that help. And the fact that you did is amazing. But people
Yeah.
know you, Barry, as the junk removal entrepreneur. And you're transitioning, not only running your company, but now coaching people to do what you're doing, which is super fascinating. Tell us a little bit about like how you serve clients.
Yeah. So on the junk removal side, so it is what it is. It's a typical blue collar business model. It's brand focused, it's customer service focused, it's employee focused. Like, we're going through all of the usual sort of business strategies to build a really good quality home service
Yeah.
business. And it got to a point where we were like, we have a few options. We could franchise this, which we did. We built an entire franchisor model. We opened a couple locations, and we learned the hard way that it wasn't really for us. So, we bought out the two existing partners, and now we're running it corporately. But when I started to reflect on what I really love doing, it's working with other entrepreneurs, and specifically in this industry. And I had enough people call me up over time and say, "Hey, what do you think of this? Like, what can you give me some advice on that?" Eventually, your calendar runs out of sort of free 30-minute blocks.
Yeah.
And so I took on a few one-on-one coaching clients, people that I thought I could really help them break through to their next level. And then we started a group coaching model specific to the industry, so that people can, we've got our weekly call. There's a community where everyone's sort of answering each other's questions. We've got all the systems and standard operating procedures from our operating business to essentially like provide it to them. And it's just, it's really taken off in the last sort of 10 months since we launched it. And it's really enjoyable too. I absolutely love it.
It's very cool to help people, isn't it? It's like it's a different way of like operating the business, and then just coaching and like riffing and helping people see things differently than that. You haven't they haven't even seen, but you've been working through in the trenches for over a decade doing. So that's awesome. Take us back though from the very, very beginning, Barry. Like tell us about your snowboarding days and maybe the line in the sand of like how you started this, because as you realize, and many of the people listening here as entrepreneurs, we're cut a little bit differently. We're wired differently. We're high achievers. And most of the time people don't understand us or get us. When was that realization? Bring us back to the very beginning of that.
Yeah, I didn't know I wanted to. So it started years ago when I was, I think, in grade 9. I was trying to just make a little bit of a side income because I wasn't allowed to work yet. And so we'd go door knocking, and we had a 3 approach system where, we would say, "Hey, can we get your dog on a dog walking schedule? If they don't have a dog, can we wash your car and get them on that schedule?" And so there's like a few little services that we'd charge $5 or $10 for. I then so I think I had an itch then, but I had no idea what entrepreneurship was. And then I had my career in personal planning class in high school. And I said I wanted to be a professional snowboarder, and I wanted to make a couple $100,000 a year doing it. And what really motivated me is when my teacher at the time looked at me and said, "Why don't you submit this project when you're ready to take on a real job?"
Yeah.
And I remember as a grade 11 student thinking, that didn't feel right. I don't like that. I don't like how this person doesn't believe in me. I don't like how they don't see what I see. That's when I realized like might have to go do something on my own in this world. So I finished high school. I moved to Whistler, 17 years old, and got a job as a night janitor. And over time, became a professional snowboarder. I was able to travel the world. We got sponsorships. We were going in competitions. It was a beautiful life for a few years. I ended up breaking my ankle, lost some sponsors, enrolled in college to learn marketing with a sort of a vision to become a marketing manager or something along those lines. And I landed on junk removal of all things. I saw what 1-800 Got Junk. They were doing about $100 million in revenue at the time in our own backyard. I was really inspired by what they had built, and we chose that as a business model. And I've really gone all in on it for the last 13 years.
That's awesome. Hey, tell us a little bit about some of the challenges having to get into that, because I mean, I'm thinking of the setback, like when you're thinking your life is consumed with being a professional, right? Like you're Sean White all of a sudden, and you're doing this the rest of your life, and that's what we're hoping and praying. And then you had this big setback. Like, how did that feel? Like having to readjust and change things. It's not easy to deal with.
It it was tough. Like I loved snowboarding. I loved it so much that we were going over 200 times a year.
Wow.
Even in the summer season, we'd be down in Chile and Argentina, filming like next year's sort of catalog or whatever was going on at the time. And when I broke my ankle, I realized I was like, I think it's time.
Hmm.
At the time there was kids like Mark McMorris, one of the Canadian Olympians. He's probably 13 years old. He had just created new tricks like the backside double cork, 1260, like tricks that people didn't even know was possible at the time. And he was just flying over 70-foot jumps doing it. And I had to have a real hard conversation with
Hmm.
myself. Like the talent doesn't match the dream. And that's okay. I was able to get as far as I was, and I had my own limiting beliefs and fears around, um, fear of death, for example. Like we had many near death scenarios in my snowboarding career where the reality is that it was absolutely terrifying. And if you can move that aside, then you can progress. But if you have that in the back of your
Yeah.
head, then it will weigh on your development quite a bit. And I didn't really realize that until my entrepreneurial life, what held me back from being like a top tier, like 0.1% professional snowboarder. And it was ultimately down to mindset.
Huh.
Um, so, yeah, essentially, I had to throw in the towel intentionally, and I walked away from it. And I really didn't snowboard the year after that. That was the crazy thing, is I brought that obsession from snowboarding and applied it in my first year in college. And I just was asking questions, staying late, like living in the library, reading Gary Vaynerchuk books and whatever else was coming up in marketing at the time.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that I just need to write a business plan, and I need to get into business as quickly as humanly
Hmm.
possible, because there is no limit on where we could take whatever business we choose to get in. And it just so happened to be junk removal. But it really could have been anything.
So what was this like? Like you sold everything and then bought like a truck and then threw your name and you had a website? Like tell us at the very beginning how this all worked.
So, yeah, if you want to talk about struggle, there was nothing to sell. I had about $1,000 to my name. I was living at home with a broken ankle in my parents' basement, and I had about $4,000 on my credit card because I had no idea how to manage my finances, which really there was nothing to manage, but it was enough to get by. I was doing construction labor in the day and delivering pizza in the evening. And ultimately, we went to the bank, and the bank financed our first pickup truck. We then bought a trailer on the side of the road in a small town up from here in a place called Chilliwack. We bought it for about $800, and we just applied everything we knew about marketing. My co-founder Scott Foran, he's our president now today. But he came from a sales background. I came from a marketing background. And we just had faith that if we combined those two elements, that we would figure out the rest of the details later on.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, we went straight from our first, we got the truck, we finished building the trailer, put some janky sidewalls up to haul junk. And then we went to my co-founder's house. He was also living at his parents' at the time. And we got our first phone call. And we kind of scrambled, and we're like, 505 Junk, Barry speaking. How can I help you? And someone's like, hey, I need some junk removal. And we're just like, we could not contain ourselves. I was trying to just like be professional on the phone. But we booked it in, and we said, we've got a same day service. If you'd like, we can come today. And that was the first job. And the rest is sort of, sort of history per se, which we can go over after that.
How
But
did you get the
yeah,
phone
once
call?
we were in,
I mean, that first thing, how did you get that? Did you have a website or did you list yourself on Google? What was the breakthrough for you on that?
Yeah, so because we had the bit of the marketing knowledge, like we built our own website initially on WordPress. We set up all our Google My Business profiles.
Hmm.
My business partner learned a lot about PPC advertising. So we actually launched pay per click
Really
on
cool.
Google within the first few weeks. This is when Groupon was hot as well. And so we ran a few daily deals so people could get like the first 200 pounds of junk removal for half
Mm.
off, knowing that long term there's like the customer retention and the upsell potential. Um, yeah, we started doing some like outbound calls to commercial clients as well. We started working with the Salvation Army really early on, donating reusable goods, keeping material out of the landfill. Um, and that's sort of it was all sort of happening all at the same
Yeah.
time. Um, and we just the first 5 years, I think we doubled our revenue 5 years in a row, just sort of like applying just as learning as much about sales and marketing as possible and then trying to like apply it the next
Yeah.
day.
I'm just thinking right now, I'm just seeing that you have an obsession with things. I find that as a personality trait that many high achievers have. They're just obsessed, and it's like hard to not think and eat and breathe what you think and do all the time. Like now that you're married and have a kid, is this obsession gone? Has it died out? Or is it just like still there and you figure out, how to cope with it and your wife deals with it?
It's such a good question. So since getting married and having our daughter last November or November the year prior, she's 14 months old now. I don't. The obsession hasn't left. I think about business all the time. I think about entrepreneurship. I've just have to set up um, sort of the team and the boundaries in my life to make sure that I'm not sacrificing one over the
Yeah.
other. And so, we're big on traction,
The
that business model
EOS.
traction
Yeah.
in our business. And so we've got the visionary implementer thing going on where my co-founder Scott, he's the president, he's the implementer. He works with like our VP of sales and operations. He works with finance, human resources. Myself, I work with Audrey, my executive assistant, our director of marketing, and Scott, the president, which allows me to have that sort of like boundary and separation from the day to day operations of the
Yeah.
company. Because the last thing they want me to do is come in and start obsessing over all the little details. I believe that's called micromanaging. Um, and then the other thing was just like working with Audrey to get my calendar really dialed
Yeah.
in and have her help me hold myself accountable to get out of the office at the right time and get home. But I am finding that obsession is actually turning into my daughter now.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love her. She's this little sweetest little princess and like just trying to learn more and more about it, about being a father.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a switch. It's just a reallocation of time ultimately.
And it's really, really unique when we talk about obsession. Most of the time, people don't understand that and they downplay it, they push it down. It's almost like a handicap. But realistically, like I see it as a superpower. Sometimes my spouse doesn't always understand why I'm the wired and why I'm obsessed. And I fully adopt it. And now I'm seeing it play out into it with my kids that they're just obsessed about things and I cheer it on. And I don't look at it as a handicap or a limitation for certain things that they don't care about or, things that they struggle in school with. I'm like, I don't care about that because most of that stuff doesn't matter. It's like the fact that they're obsessed and leaning toward it, just like you and I are wired, I think is an edge that most people don't have. And if you're listening here in this and you feel and you relate to that, like it's something you deal with, but like what Barry says, you set up boundaries so you can have like a thriving life. But it's so good to have that obsession, keep that aflame, and just not use it as a limiting belief or a thing of like, how do I control myself? But more of like, hey, I just go to release the beast in life and business because I think that's epic. I think you need that for sure.
Yeah. And it kind of keeps you focused too, because you can wear, especially in the beginning, you can wear 100 different hats as an entrepreneur. I
Yeah,
mean, everyone's heard that before, the 26 hats that you wear to start your
yeah,
business. But over time, my role has moved more into like visionary, strategic planning, like making sure cash flow is strong, making sure we're building out our leadership team. Those are really like the four
yeah,
buckets. And if I can just stay obsessed over those four things, then I can serve my company a lot better than if I started obsessing over a role where maybe I wouldn't add as much value.
Yeah. Let me ask you this one, because I think many entrepreneurs that are like, nobody understands me then, so I have to just go do it myself. The fact that you have a business partner and have kept that strong relationship for over a decade, how has that been? Has that been easy? Are you glad you did it, or are you seeing like the normal challenges that maybe business partners would have?
Yeah, so there's actually three of us.
Yeah,
So our
three.
first employee has grown from a truck team driver to went through all the ranks, knows this company inside out, and now he's our VP of Sales and Operations. So he came in as a partner about 6 years ago, and it's like any relationship. Like, it's not default, it's not automatic. Like, we've been through challenges, we've been through hard times, we've probably all doubted each other at some point, but what keeps us all sort of glued together. And to answer your question, zero regret by any means. I love having business partners. The thing that keeps us going back is one of the first things we did, and we stick to it, is getting really clear on our values. And so they're all over the walls, and the typical office marketing that you do. But what really helps us, we've been faced with really hard decisions to make over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at, is that decision in line with our values, then typically it really simplifies the process. And where I find business partners start to separate or go in a direction that isn't sort of like in line with like the vision or where you want to go, and ultimately leads to fallout, is when people start making decisions where the other partner's like, I don't like that.
Mm.
That seems a little shady. That seems too risky. That seems like you've lost touch of your purpose,
Mm.
or you're just chasing money, or you're, something along those lines. And that's where one of my partners, Alex, he calls it the three-headed monster, where I'm sort of responsible to be the CEO. My partner is supposed to, he's responsible to be the president, and Alex is overseeing the sales and operations. So that's he's probably got 5 sales, 20. He's probably got about 30 people on his team, and so he sees like every single nut and bolt of the operation. And so having that nice like layered leadership allows us to just sort of like stay in our lane and do our own jobs.
Yeah. From at the very beginning, though, was it hard? Because I mean, building that revenue, you guys were probably maybe single at that time, but like having a family to support and other stuff like that while you guys are splitting it 2 or 3 ways is not always easy.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, there's pros and cons to all business
Yeah.
relationships. And if you go 50-50 with someone, then essentially you're dividing the dividends or profit in half. And so you really better make sure you're aligned to build a sizable business,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, we were just talking about the decision-making stand before that, but now you've got 3 families to support. I mean, we've got all the employees' families as well. But on top of that, the business needs to support 3 families, 3 lifestyles, 3 personal preferences.
Yeah.
And it does add a layer of complexity to it,
I
for
could
sure.
totally imagine that. It would be. Help me give an idea to our audience here of like, you work with helping people build a business. What are some of the key things that people miss? Like you had talked about, like you didn't know how to manage your personal finances, but now you've learned it and you've kind of really gone through these different seasons and stages to kind of prioritize what do businesses miss, and what do you should always coach them on to master their business?
Yeah, each revenue size has a different level of complexity.
Okay.
And so like 0 to 500,000, you can typically do it all on your own. You can take the inbound calls, you can run the marketing, you can oversee your operations. At 500,000 to a million, um, you don't need a strong management team in place, but you definitely need to start being able to outsource and delegate, perhaps sales, certainly getting support with marketing if that's not your area of expertise, and pretty much all of the production and operations that's happening in the company. 1 to 2 million, you need 1 or 2 managers to be able to actually oversee all the team that you've hired to put in place. And then 2 to 5 million is when you start putting senior leadership in. And the interesting thing about all that is a lot of people will just miss those like key areas. At 0 to 500,000, they refuse to delegate. They're too
Yeah.
controlling. At 500,000 to a million, they don't know how to manage people. And so they're getting turnover on their office staff because they're either micromanaging or their expectations are unclear or too high. And then when they deliver beneath the expectations, they, throw a fit or rub people the wrong way. And yeah, there's just each stage has a certain level of risk. And so what I find with coaching where I can help is we've already been there. We've been through those stages. And so rather than winging it like we did, my preference is to support people to, help them understand what to do, but more so help them understand what not to do.
Yeah. Some of the things that I always point my clients to is that they need to know how many leads are coming in, and then keeping an eye on the revenue, because most often than not, like their revenue, their bank account, they don't want to look at that because it's scary sometimes, or the unknown, or they don't want to make bad decisions, and so they just leave it kind of elusive, but they don't keep an eye on it. They don't know the leading lagging indicators of the amount of leads they need to get in to kind of do the fulfillment and this, that, and the other, and then they don't know what kind of revenue they need to even know. Like, have you noticed some of those challenges as well? Like, those are kind of key metrics that people need to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, that's such a good point to bring up. So like most industries, junk removal included, coaching, like you name it, it's a revenue focused industry, meaning that to keep the lights on, to keep the cash flow, the oxygen coming in, it's done by revenue. We're not a tech startup where we're pre-funded with millions of dollars to deploy that capital with the intention to build a product, which long-term is going to go through you put it through the revenue model and there we be. But with junk removal, like it's revenue first. Nothing happens without revenue. Yeah. And to your point, where does revenue come from? If we break it down, it comes from our sales team. So what's our sales conversion rate? In our industry, if you're closing 60% of inbound sales or greater, you're doing a good job. Most people don't know that. And, being able to basically, let them know, be aware of that, that's a good starting point. So now we got our sales conversion rate. Then we look at our sales qualified leads. We look at our marketing qualified leads. And a lot of the people, especially under $1 million in revenue, they might not have even heard that language before.
Yeah.
They know that they should turn on Google Google Ads, PPC. They know they should be posting on social. They know that referrals are the most profitable lead source. They have a certain baseline understanding of marketing, but they don't understand all of the intrinsic KPIs of tracking all of the marketing campaigns, especially in the more costly investments like, Google Ads, and understanding that funnel of all of it and how the smallest little adjustment at each stage of the funnel can have a profound impact on the business at scale. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a really good point to bring up, that most people's knowledge, specifically in marketing, which is the starting point of revenue, it really is lacking.
Yeah. Man, oh man, like this is so interesting to kind of talk about this, because most people miss that. They hope and pray when they started their business. And I'm so surprised that you guys started with that lead focus of like, hey, we got to turn on marketing and leads. Because I mean, if you talk to so many business owners like I do, most of them get hung up with the not important things. Like, I got to set up, my website, or set up some like not as important things than just running ads and like finding ways to like prioritize getting people on the phone to sell them a service to help them out. Right. What are some other like challenges that people have, maybe some pitfalls, if you would, of things and people that you see that have the hardest challenges in their business when they first start?
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on financials in a second because it's a capital intensive industry, mm-hmm. and so that's probably the second one. But back to the marketing thing, it was actually back in college. Man, this must have been about 15 years ago, and I can't remember which Gary V book it was, but I'll never forget it. And he just had the website as the circle, and he had all the lead sources surrounding it: referrals, PPC, social media, organic content, social media advertising, like business development, B2B, like, and they all pointed to your home base, which is the website. And so understanding that, we need a good home base from day one, and that's going to be worth the investment. And also we need a large variety of sources that was sending qualified traffic leads to our website. Mm-hmm. that was essentially like how we thought about our
Yeah.
business in the beginning, trusting that, yeah, Scott and I at 23 years old, we can hop in a truck and go haul junk, and I'm sure we'd be just fine. It was the other side of it where that was more of the critical point where we needed to understand that. Back to your question, the second point is around financials. So most people aren't really 0 to 500,000. You can sort of win your business without really that big of a budget, or a very detail oriented sort of like P&L. And again, we did that from the beginning. One of my early mentors was a fellow named Mike Drever, and he built out a franchise system called Cruise Ship Centers and sold it to Expedia for $40 million.
Wow.
But he sat us down a week before we launched, and he was like, "You need to understand strategic planning." And I was like, "Strategic what? Like, what are we strategizing here? Like, we've got a pickup truck and a trailer." And he's like, "Yeah, but you have a much larger vision than that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go write out that vision. I want to see exactly where your business is going to be in 10 years, but specifically, I want to see where it's going to be in 3 years," which we talked about before. Then he started talking about the one-page strategic plan, the Rockefeller habits, a lot of these books that have been really transformational for us over the years. And he's like, he walked us through how to build a one-page strategic plan. And we could look at our revenue target, we can look at our gross profit margin, we can look at our overhead, our net profit, and therefore our cash flow. We could look at the things we wanted to implement into our business so that 12 months from today, it wasn't just going to be the same business from when we started. It was going to grow and evolve.
Right.
And so we actually started building out strategic plans for our business as 23-year-olds who really had nothing, no business doing it. But that was really transformational for us. So that's one thing that we coach on quite a bit, is helping people understand, yes, the 3-year vision, but specifically 12 months from today, when we do it, usually in December, we map out the year. 12 months from today, what's your goals? What's your KPIs? What are you going to implement into the business? What's your tech stack? What's your marketing strategies and campaigns looking like? And we just go through the process of writing it down in about a half day. We do it a bit more at scale now with our team. We took them out to Palm Springs and did a leadership retreat over a week, and take it a bit quite seriously, but fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the other thing that people just miss. They don't build good plans.
Yeah.
And it's one thing we try and just hammer home on people when we're coaching them.
You're an obsessive learner like I am. There's a thing called, like, you're just learning to learn, and then there's like just in time learning. Like, how do you theme out or plan your obsession of learning? And how do you theme it? Do you by quarters? Do you have a game plan of what you kind of articulate that feeds your brain for things that you're learning and growing? Like, how do you plan that out?
I like that just-in-time learning example, because I've probably bought, I don't know how many books are in Audible and at my home, and just looking around my office right now, and there's a couple behind me. Like, I buy all the books, but I don't read them right away. Because so a really good example is in 2024, we really wanted to level up as marketers. And so someone turned me on Hormozy. I read $100 million leads. It really hit home. Then we got our marketing team to read it. Then we got our sales team to read it. Then I got my partners to read it. And then we met about it and talked about it. And then I read it again. And it's that obsessive learning where I really like to zero in on topics to learn about, knowing that we're in the process of applying that in our business today. It's not to say that, I don't want to learn about leadership right now. It's just not a weakness that we're trying to convert into a strength. Mm-hmm. And so that's usually when I'm looking at learning, I'm like, what do we suck at? Like, what if we convert this weakness into a strength? If that actually happened, how will that help grow and scale our business? And so I usually like to just identify those weaknesses once a quarter, definitely on an annual basis, but usually quarterly when we update our strategic plan. I like to just really look for those holes in our company and go try and become an expert in it.
Yeah, I love that. Barry, I really got some insights from you. How can people, though, further connect with you, follow you? I'll put those links down below.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So Instagram, it's just at my name, Barry Hartman. Bolt Accelerator is what it is. You could search for it, but it's Bolt, BOLT dot accelerator. I'm active on LinkedIn as well. So, a name search, I'll probably just pop up. I believe it's /Hartman Barry.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually just hired a full-time content manager starting March 1st. So we're going to be going all in on social media and not just sharing about the junk removal industry, but all the topics, entrepreneurship, leadership, and just sharing all of our flaws and things we've learned over the years. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Go connect with Barry. He's going to be a good guy to follow around business ideas and coaching and other areas around service-based business. So go connect with him. And before you leave, make sure to check out that free training down below that I talked about at the very beginning. That's going to be a huge helpful for everybody that's listening in on this. And we will see you on the next episode.